The Niners are under 500, and it seems like the players and their head coach disagree about what the identity of the 2024 team is. We'll discuss that identity and more next on Cohn and Krueger. Good afternoon. Welcome to Cohn and Krueger, presented by BetUS. That's Larry Krueger. I'm Grant Cohn. The 49ers just lost another game, and it's feeling really weird around the facility. You're there. I'm there. Travarius Ward told Mike Silver after the game yesterday, something's really weird about this team, and we're feeling it. They collapsed again. They did it 2 weeks ago in L.A. They had a 10-point lead, a double-digit lead, and lost. This time they had a 13-point lead and lost. And it turns out, according to AP's Josh Dubow, Kyle Shanahan, as a head coach of the Niners, now has lost a franchise record 18th game while leading at 1 point by at least 10 points. I'll read out the list of most in Niners history. It's 1, Shanahan with 18, Bill Walsh, 8 in 10 years, Dick Nolan, 8 back in the 70s, Steve Mariucci, 6, Buck Shaw, 6. Haven't gotten word on where Jim Harbaugh ranked, but it must have been less than 6. This is an alarming pattern with Kyle Shanahan that goes back to his days in Atlanta. It's crazy to have a stat attached to it. What do you think of it?
Well, it's really interesting. My sense of it is that Kyle's too pass happy. I like Kyle. I think very highly of Kyle. I think he's too pass happy. And I went back and I decided to look it up because I had to look it up. And I looked this up, Grant, the 5 biggest losses of Kyle's career. And this is just my opinion. I took out the NFC Championship game against Philly because Purdy got knocked out in the 6th play and it distorted the stats. So I look at his 5 biggest losses of his NFL career. OC in Atlanta, they lose the Super Bowl up 28-3. Super Bowl 54, they lost to the Chiefs. NFC title game, they lost to the Rams in L.A., They lost to the Ravens last year on Christmas, and then they lost the Super Bowl last year. In my opinion, Grant, those are the 5 biggest losses of his career. In these 5 losses, his teams have run 109 times and passed 169 times. In other words, they're 61% pass, 39% run. He gets too pass happy, and it has consistently burned him. It's not like, I wonder why he keeps losing all of these huge games. It's the same reason every time, and it's the same reason they lost yesterday, Grant. Yesterday, he's going up against a Cardinal run defense that was 28th in the league, that allowed the Commanders the week prior to run for 216 yards. And despite the fact that the Niners led after the first quarter, the second quarter, and the third quarter, they only ran 43% of the time, 26 times total. They threw it 35 times, 57%. And in reality, we were talking before the show, when you actually think of the Brock runs, actual dropbacks versus handoffs, we're talking about 41 passes and 22 runs against a Cardinals defense that's the worst in the game and got gutted the week before. I love Shanahan. I think the world of Shanahan. I think he's a really good coach. I'm not saying fire him, but he gets too pass happy in many of these games, and it has burned him over and over again.
Yeah, and it's like he's been doing it. He's done it 18 times. He's done it, and all of his big collapses have the same pattern, like you said, passing too much. At a certain point, if you're a player on his team, like, aren't you looking at him like, this is your fault? This is what you do. Here you go again. We lost another game. We were up 10 points, and you started passing the ball, and none of us figure out. We don't understand why you do this. But it's something that you do consistently year after year, and at a certain point, it's got to, how do you not lose confidence in a guy? It's like, I understand that he's really good at racking up yards. He's great at it. But at that point in the game, you're more concerned with grinding down the clock than racking up yards at any at any cost. That's something that Jim Harbaugh understood. He didn't have like highly ranked offenses, but his offenses wouldn't lose games for his team.
The other thing that you can point to in those big games, every single time you're going up against the better quarterback. The better quarterback was always on the other side, and yet you wind up passing more than running. And those Atlanta teams were really good running teams. The 49ers have been a really good running team. Heck, you had Christian McCaffrey last year. The offensive player of the year was your running back. This year, Mason has just been rumbling. He rumbled in this game yesterday for 6.4 yards a carry. And still, it's pass, more pass. And you sit there and you wonder, how many times is the old definition of insanity? How many times can you do something, the same thing repeatedly, expecting to have a different result? It's getting tired.
And I think some fans struggle with like, well, when do you know when to criticize the head coach, when to hold the head coach responsible for a certain issue? I think when it happens 18 times the same way, you got to look at him. Like, why are you passing in these situations? What is it about your makeup is leading you to make the same wrong decision every time?
And it's not about their quarterback, because a lot of times he's doing this with Jimmy Garoppolo.
Right.
I mean, he was throwing more than he was running, and he had Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback in some of those teams, some of these games that we're talking about.
I just think it's fair to look at him as like a guy who's erratic under pressure. I mean, he's not stupid. He knows football, but it seems like if defenses show a certain front or bring out a certain personnel grouping, Kyle will say, well, I can't run the ball anymore, even though he's averaging 6 yards a carry. Against this look, we got to pass the ball. Not necessarily. If your goal is to optimize yards per play, maybe, but in the fourth quarter up 10, it's about the clock more than it's about yards. And I think he loses sight of that. And I think that's why the criticism of him is that he's more of a coordinator than a head coach. Your job as a head coach, more than having an explosive offense, is to be able to close it out if you have a 10-point lead. I feel like a good head coach is sort of expected to seal the deal. End of story. I don't care about your offense. You're the head coach. Find a way to win when you're up 10 plus points. And he finds a way to lose way too often for a guy who's supposed to be elite at his job.
And it's basically the same reason every time. Like every one of those losses, I didn't go looking at those games thinking, I wonder what I'll find. I kind of knew in the back of my head, they almost every single one of these games, they threw the ball more than they ran the ball. They threw the ball more than they should have run the ball. Here's why it really doesn't make sense. Their offensive line is totally mediocre, and it's a better run blocking line than a pass protection line for sure. And then, of his receivers, I kind of think his receivers look kind of slow, to be honest. I mean, I don't see anybody among their receivers that anybody's afraid that's going to run by them, especially with IU kind of rounding into form. He played better yesterday, but he doesn't look like he looks like he's lost a step. He's the deep threat. The rest of the Deebo Samuel, what would you say you did yesterday?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe Deebo should have gone back and maybe carried the boom box out instead of having somebody else carry it out, because I thought he was preserving himself for what he was going to do the rest of the day. Instead, if he had carried that boom box, it would have been his biggest contribution of the day. So I don't know. Kyle got too pass happy. The O-line struggles in pass protection. The wide receivers don't get separation. They're really not good in the red zone. I mean, and that's just the offensive side of the ball. I mean, I got a whole myriad of complaints about the defensive side. We haven't even touched special teams at this point. But offensively, the Niners are way, way, way too talented to be scoring 16 points. 16 points and shut out in the second half against the Arizona Cardinals. Who's their big dominator on their defensive line? I mean, seriously, Roy Lopez.
Nichols.
Yeah, Belial Nichols.
I don't.
Come on, man.
All right, here, I got a question for you. So, look, we've laid out how Kyle Shanahan loses his mind in these games and starts passing too much and gets away from the identity of the team. We all know that. It's been apparent for years. What's crazy is that his players are starting to say it at post-game interviews. Brock Purdy, the little choir boy, so nice, comes out and he says, we just got to get back to playing complimentary football. And when he says it, I don't think anything of it. Then Nick Bosa comes out about a half an hour later, says the same thing. And I'm thinking, what does this mean? To me, it's a nice, respectful way of saying, boy, our coach is calling a lot of passes, we want to get back to the way we used to win games, which is running the ball to conserve our defense so that our defense can close out the victory. And then when asked about it, Kyle Shanahan's like, no, complementary football just means when like all three phases are playing well at the same time. Not really. That's not how I take it. I mean, maybe you take it differently, but do you sense this too, that the players kind of want one identity and are confused as to why Kyle Shanahan is forcing another?
It's funny, when he was asked about it, his line today was, the players just talk about it because I talk about it a lot to them. So now basically they're just regurgitators of your message. No, I think
they appreciated you saying that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that, what do I take out of complimentary football is that, man, my defense, which used to be awesome, and I never had to protect my defense. Now I have to consider protecting my defense, which means limiting their snaps because I just don't have that kind of a defense anymore. But that seems like a secondary, like protecting your defense seems secondary to Kyle calling the game that he wants to call, which is a pass happy game. Now, I like Brock Purdy and I like some of these weapons, but when you're going against a defense that's 18th against the pass, 28th against the run, and you've got Mason, I mean, even Tim Ryan, who's the most pro Niner guy there is, said in the pregame show on KMBR, expect JP Mason to get 20 carries plus. He didn't get 15. He got 14 carries.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's hard to explain what's going on. It's like the whole team is pleading. Can we please just play the way we used to play? And Kyle's has these reasons. Like, well, we can't do play action, or we can't run the ball like we want to do. This is how we have to play. And Tom Brady in the broadcast is like, geez, this is awfully strange. Like, where's the play action? Why aren't they running the ball? I don't know. I mean, I hate to go into conspiracy theories here because every other answer is like him not being smart, but he is smart. I almost feel like he's trying to justify what they're going to have to pay Brock, and he's trying to show ownership. Like, look, this guy's a great quarterback. We're going to lead the league in passing this year, as opposed to featuring Mason, because Mason's going to be up for a contract extension next year too. Like, who do they want to feature? Who do they want to give money to? Brock. So maybe I just don't get it, man. I mean, maybe he's trying to make a case that Brock's worth it, but in making the case, he's almost exposing Brock and hurting his numbers. I'm flabbergasted.
I don't even know what to say about it, because at this point, you've got Purdy, and it's like, okay, so Purdy's now in a spot where his O-line doesn't pass protect well. His receivers don't get great separation. He drops back to pass. He's scanning the field. Everybody's blanketed. I watch the all 22 every week. I'm not seeing this huge amounts of room. So he's instead of throwing it into harm's way or hurling the ball into a team meeting, he's like, you know what? I'm going to reset my platform. I'm going to move around, and maybe I can run for it. Maybe I can find somebody on the other side of the formation. And so then he gets into that mode, right? Of I don't have my first read. I don't have my second read. Everything's breaking down. I'm going to get out of the pocket, make a play. Okay, that works a little bit, but then you start training your mind to be like, one progression, two progression, go. And then I think there's a chaotic feel to the Niner offense because he's running more. And then when you run, it's not a law that says that if you run, you'll get a positive result. Sometimes you're going to scramble into a sack. He did that. Sometimes you're going to scramble into a turnover. Sometimes you're going to scramble into a fumble. I mean, it's extending the play, but it's not guaranteeing a better play. So I don't want to criticize him too harshly on expanding the plays, because he's needed to behind this because everything's breaking down. But when you get into that mindset of I got to get out of the pocket and make it happen, you start to take chances that you shouldn't take, and the turnovers come. And that's it right there. If you said we've all watched Brock a lot. What's not good about Brock? When he's not necessarily going great, he turns it over too much. So when you're asking him to run and make all these plays, I think that just kind of makes him turn the ball, adds more pressure, more off schedule, more turnovers.
I just think it's so alarming what's happening to this offense across the board when McCaffrey's out. I mean, It's not just McCaffrey. Ayuk's one of the highest paid players in the league. So is Debo. Kittle's one of the highest paid at his position. Like, it's supposed to be talented across the board. But you take McCaffrey out and all of a sudden he scores 16 points against the Cardinals? What? But then you go back and think 2022, this offense was doing the same thing before they got McCaffrey. They were really struggling to score. And back then we just blamed Jimmy. But now it seems like maybe it wasn't all Jimmy's fault. Like, maybe Kyle was struggling. Maybe Ayuk and Kittle and Debo aren't really necessarily weekly alphas on a team. Maybe they were really all benefiting from a true offensive player of the year player on their team. And now there's no right way for them to go about it on offense because Kyle's out of ideas.
I have a theory. Here's my theory, Grant. I think in the red zone, Christian McCaffrey is the ultimate cheat sheet. He's the ultimate get right guy, right? Didn't he have like 18 red zone touchdowns last year? He's the best red zone player in the league. I think having this player has made them kind of lazy and complacent. Instead of designing the right spacing and really drilling on the spacing, the timing, and that kind of thing, things that would normally get you 6 in the red zone, they've allowed themselves to just lean on Christian for a year and a half, and Jimmy did it. And it's like, we'll call this play. We'll look for that guy. And if all else fails, we'll dump it to Christian and he'll make it happen. And they've done that to such a degree that I think it's now hurting them. I don't see the same kind of route combinations or thought being made to creating a little bit of space like you see on other parts of the field. I'm not seeing that in the red zone. And I just wonder if they leaned on Christian for so long that they are now kind of worse for having done that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, because with Christian, it's easy. You could throw him the ball in front of the goal line. He can catch it one-on-one, break a tackle, and score. It's a low-risk, high-reward play. Now, you don't have anyone. I mean, maybe Jordan Mason could do it. They don't give him the opportunity. They never throw him the ball in the red zone. So now they're like trying to. They should, but they don't. Now they're trying to like force the ball to Debo and get him to break tackles to get in the end zone, but he's not really doing that this season. And they're throwing passes to the back pylon to Jennings and Kittle. That's not a very creative red zone offense. They're not really utilizing Brandon Ayuk in that part of the field, which is kind of astounding considering how much they're paying him. And again, it's like, yeah, Christian McCaffrey, he's a cheat code, but Kyle, dude, you're supposed to be the best of the best. You have a lot of talent. You got to be good in the red zone. And right now you're frankly bad.
Bad. The other thing I see in that, now I haven't done like the whole breakdown on this, so this is more of just my recollection. But I feel like I see Brock scanning the field a lot in the red zone, as opposed to a designed, we want to look to this, or throw it away. He seems like he's like the play that's being called is never open, and that the result is he's backpedaling, moving a little bit, scanning the field, moving a little to his right, moving a little bit to the left, just trying to find an opening in there. Like, when was the last time you saw a red zone pass play where it literally went to his first read
and he's open?
And where Jimmy always first read, it was slants, it was this, it was that. There was a lot of incompletions if the first read wasn't there. There wasn't a lot after that. Now Brock does see the field, he extends plays, but when was the last time in the red zone he dropped back to pass and went to his first read?
It's a good question. I can't remember. So let me ask you this. So look, the red zone offense is documented. It's not good. And Kyle Shanahan is responsible for that. The Niners when they lose, they often give up big leads. They did it in the Super Bowl, and they've done it again twice this year to teams that aren't good. We're 2-3. He's in year 8. Head coaches all get tuned out eventually. Do you think Kyle Shanahan is in danger of losing this locker room? And do you think his seat is beginning to heat up for the first time in his career?
The expectations are high. So there's no doubt, sitting where they're at right now after 5 games at 2-3, there's no doubt that his seat is getting hotter. If you say that his seat's not getting hotter, you're just being obstinate at this point. Here's the other factor that nobody's going to talk about. The 49ers have the 5th toughest remaining schedule. So they've dug themselves a pretty big hole, and they've got the 5th toughest schedule left still yet to play. So they've lost 3 out of 4. They don't look good in any of the 3 phases coming out of this last game. And they've got a short turnaround against a team that's lost 2 in a row, will be at home, and who has a defense coordinator who seems to have Kyle's number. And the Niners have to win this game because the Chiefs are looming and the 5th toughest schedule is looming. So I don't think he's lost the room because I think the guys still very much believe in him. You got to remember this. He is an offensive coach, and his offense scores 30 a game and has since Brock Purdy has shown up. So it's going to take more than what's happened thus far to make these guys lose their belief. But it's a gradual thing. It's a gradual thing. And I've never heard anybody really openly question Kyle, but Mike Silver has three different Niner players who told him that, like, what the hell's going on, kind of a thing.
Well, this year their offense is down to 25 points per game. It's still scoring, but I mean they're not scoring in the red zone, and these collapses they got to go at the feet of someone. And I mean it's not going to be Nick Bosa coming out saying, "Yeah, blame me that we blew a 10-point lead."
But he deserves blame too. I mean, since you brought his name up, I'm going to mention him. He missed 3 tackles yesterday. He's not TJ Watt. All right. He's not Aiden Hutchinson. He's a clear step behind those guys right now. He had 2 pressures. So like one for you and one for me. I mean, that's it. This guy has not played like the player that won the Defensive Player of the Year award just 2 years ago. So that's real. I'm not saying that, he's the problem on D it's all Nick. It's not. They got problems up and down. But the Niner D-line against Arizona this week had 1 sack, 2 quarterback hits, 9 pressures, and most of that was Leonard Floyd.
Yeah.
Nick did have a
look,
pick.
This is why I look at it. It's like 4 years ago, the Niners lost the Super Bowl, and then they had a bad season in 2020. They were 6-10. It kind of felt like the whole season was a free year for Kyle Shanahan. He was working with house money. He just got an extension. He was ahead of schedule. He had so much promise. It didn't matter what happened in that year after the Super Bowl. This year, it feels like it matters. I don't think he can go 6-11. I don't think he can go 7-10. If he does that this year, I'm not sure he keeps his job. Maybe he does, but I think
your source said that if he didn't win the Super Bowl, he'd be out.
He didn't. No. My source didn't say that. He didn't say that
okay.
Kyle specifically would be out. He said heads would roll. Maybe there could be John. Right, maybe it could be someone lower. If he specifically misses the playoffs, he could be out. And I'm not saying I heard that from a source. It just seems like that's the vibe around the facility right now. I don't know.
Which would be terrifying, I think, to most Niner fans, because look what happened when they got rid of Jim Harbaugh. It's not just, hey, we don't like what's going on, we want to change the jockey. Okay. But do you believe that Jed and Dr. John do you believe that they have somebody ready and waiting who's going to be better? I would say the chances that they could pick somebody who's better is probably about 2%.
I'd take Ben Johnson.
I have no confidence.
If they want like a consultant, I would recommend Ben Johnson. I wouldn't do the Bill Belichick. I wouldn't do Bill Belichick. I think he's a little bit old. I think he's a little bit crotchety, and I don't think he relates that well to young players, although he's trying to refurbish his image on the Pat McAfee show weekly, which is hilarious to me.
I would need a serious Belichick OC. I don't know who that would be.
Yeah, I wouldn't want Belichick. Ben Johnson to me is interesting. Maybe you get Ben Johnson and Robert Saleh.
Is going from Kyle Shanahan to Robert Saleh going to be met?
You could get a defensive coordinator. You could get good DCs are available, but good offensive coaches are hard to find. I feel like Ben Johnson is like the pick, and everyone's been waiting for him. He could have went to Washington this year. Probably should have went to Washington this year. You think he regrets not going to Washington this year?
He should. Good. He should. Anybody should regret. Maybe even Ayuk should regret not partnering with Jaden Daniels.
Seriously,
Jaden Daniels right now is the man.
Okay, I got another question. Let's get off Kyle for a second. Pause. Brock Purdy in his last 10 games. This is interesting. So going back to the Ravens game, we've talked about this for a couple of weeks. That was like the first welcome to the NFL moment for Brock Purdy. Happens to everyone. 4 picks in that game. Since that game, he's 5-5. as a starting quarterback. Wins aren't a quarterback stat, but I think it's interesting. 5-5, 11 touchdowns, 11 turnovers, 9 interceptions. Now we've watched the games. He's played really well. He's made a lot of plays, but that's not what Brock Purdy was putting up for a solid year beforehand. So when you look at those numbers, how do you explain it? What is happening right now? Are defenses catching up to him? Are they catching up to Kyle? Are they catching up to the way Kyle's using him? Or is this a fluke?
Well, listen to what the players say. You've heard Brock say a couple times now, man, the other team that we're playing really took away what we wanted to do. So he's basically telling you that other teams are reading our mail. Other teams know what we're going to do. He might as well have said we're predictable, because that's the same thing as saying other teams know what we're going to do means we're predictable.
Yeah, when Jimmy wanted to say that, he just said your plays freaking suck, man. But Brock's more diplomatic.
Josh Dubow had this stat, Grant. I don't know if you caught this one. Brock Purdy went down 1 to 8 points in the fourth quarter in the regular season, is 10 for 26 for 149 yards with no touchdowns, 4 picks, 18.4 passer rating with 1 comeback and 6 chances.
Wow.
So, yeah. Dubow had that on Sunday.
That's stunning.
That is
what do you make of that?
That he can't do it by himself. That he can't do it. He's a really good quarterback, but he can't do it all by himself. And at times on this team, he's starting to be asked to do it by himself. He's got a line that's not protecting for him. He's got receivers that aren't really separating. You lost Christian, who was just a great player. You have a terrific back in Mason, but then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, here's Garendo. And out of nowhere, we're not using Mason anymore. Mason's awesome. He's running. He's 6 yards a carry. You know what? Let's not run him 20, 25 times. We may win. Let's run him 14 times. That's the number. So I just think that I think it's a combination. I don't think Brock's the greatest quarterback that ever lived. I think he's doing more now than he's ever done before in a Niner uniform because he has to. And I think his equation, Grant, is starting to break down a little bit around him. I don't think it's as simple as the league's onto him, but the league has a real good idea that Brandon Ayuk is going to run a crossing pattern, and they're looking for the dagger. They're looking for the in-cutting route. I mean, it was pretty easy for this coordinator, Michael McDonald, last year in Baltimore on Christmas to just drop a couple defenders into the zone in the middle of the field, blitz some corners off condensed, when the Niners went condensed formation, get home with those corners and have Brock throw the ball into a team meeting. It happened. He turned the ball over a ton. So, I think he's a really good quarterback, and I think he's a really good quarterback because he's smart, he's accurate, he's tough, and I think he's also quick. And I think he's a good leader, but he can't do it all himself. Absolutely can't do it all himself. And if you put him from behind and take away the run game, make him throw it down after down, and behind this offensive line, there's going to be some problems.
I think what we're seeing too with Brock is that it's been hard to. He entered the starting lineup like a month after McCaffrey, so it's hard to delineate what exactly Brock brings to the offense and what Christian brings to the offense. And I think it's clear that when Christian got here, it took the league like more than a calendar year to really figure out a way to handle the Niners offense. Like once Christian got on the field, there was just wide open people in the passing game left and right. And all the Niners really needed was a quarterback who could scan the field quickly, find the open guy, deliver the ball on time. I'm not saying that's like anyone could do that because Trey couldn't do it. Jimmy couldn't do it and stay healthy. Brock could do it. But now that you take Christian away and guys aren't just wide open, he has to like play the position the way other players have to play it. And that's when you prove whether you're worth $60 million a year. And I don't think he is worth $60 million a year. And there's no shame in that. He's probably worth $30 or $40 million a year. And I think at that price point, you could still win. But the more he gets paid, the more he's going to have to be running around every week, searching for guys to get open who aren't open. And I don't think that's his game. I think he's more a guy who does that when you have to, but you want to put him on a team that's stacked. He knows what to do with a team that's stacked. I don't think he's, like you said, he's not going to be carrying a team that's lacking talent, and this team isn't lacking talent.
I mean, there are very few guys like Mahomes.
Very few.
But those guys can literally just say, jump on my back, guys. I'm carrying us.
Just invest in defense. I'll handle it.
That.
Yeah, you got
Brock
it.
doesn't have that.
No.
But I do trust him. I do think he should be the 49er quarterback. I don't think it's like, oh, man, he's not him. He's been exposed. They
Trade
need
him.
to find another
Draft
guy.
a quarterback. No, it just sucks because, like, if you think a guy's your franchise quarterback, all of a sudden it's like, oh, here's $60 million. It's like, no, isn't there a middle ground? He's the guy, but he's not that.
It's, and this position is a hard position to evaluate. I mean, I'll say my favorite college quarterback is Cam Ward. I love Cam Ward, and he just pulled an amazing upset Saturday in Berkeley. But I was talking to some Miami people today who were like, yeah, we're not really sure if he's got a pro caliber arm. And I'm like, well, wait a second. That guy looks like Lamar Jackson, the way he plays with poise and runs with poise. And he looks like he's in total command. So, all these quarterbacks have to be evaluated over time. You can't evaluate them in a day or a month. It takes more time. But I think Brock's a hell of a quarterback. But as he gets paid 50 or 60 and the rest of the talent goes down, are the Niners still a Super Bowl contender? They can't go 0 for 5 in the first round like they've done under Lynch and Shanahan and have Brock Purdy making anything close to $60 million and compete for a Super Bowl. They have to start hitting on the first 2 days of the draft, or they're not going to be a competitor for the Super Bowl.
Agree. And I want to just point out, I'm not comparing Brock to Jimmy Garoppolo. It's not what I'm doing. But what I'm saying is this is Kyle's pattern. Gets a quarterback, solid quarterback, starting quarterback, bursts onto the scene. A lot of instant success. Go to the Super Bowl, lose. Come back, and it's a slow, steady decline. I'm not saying that's what happened with Brock. It's been 5 games. But that's what happened to Jimmy. Absolutely, that's what happened to Jimmy. And did Jimmy decline, or did Kyle get figured out in what he was doing with Jimmy? Don't know. We'll have to see. But what I do want to do is,
Jimmy was ever any good, to be completely honest. I think Jimmy had a nice little run. But what Jimmy's problem is the footwork in the pocket was just so pitter patter. He just panicked. And I used to interview Greg Cosell every week. I'd be like, Greg, what are you seeing? What's the film show? And he'd be like, well, you know what? Jimmy Garoppolo's just not a great late in the down thrower. And I'm like, Greg, that's like scout speak for saying he sucks. And I'm not saying that, he's just not a great guy after the first, you take his first read away. Well, what are we talking about then? So
I was never a Jimmy Garoppolo guy, but like in one of his worst years, 2021, he completed 68% of his throws. He threw 20 touchdown passes and 12 picks. Right now, Brock has 6 touchdown passes and 4 picks, and a 65% completion percentage. Like, Jimmy had better numbers, and he's better than Jimmy, but this is an alarming trend. We saw what happened to Jimmy, and is this going to happen to the next Kyle Shanahan wonderkind? I hope not.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say about that, but when I look at this offense, I see kind of a mediocre line, a coordinator in Kyle that seems a little too pass happy, receivers that aren't getting great separation, and it all kind of comes down on the head of the quarterback. And it's just like, make it all work. You make it all work. And he might be able to make it work here and there, but they're not the same. Without Christian, you can't take a Christian McCaffrey away and not feel that. And they've taken him away, and man, they feel it. I don't think they would feel it as much as they have if they would just lean on their run game a little bit more and be a tad more conservative in their approach. Look at Green Bay. They lost Love. They brought in Malik Willis. They had a game, Grant, where they ran 53 times and won. They had another game where they ran like 40 times and won. It's like they decided, hey, we're going to run the ball and take the pressure off the quarterback. The Niners don't have an ability to do that. It's all on the quarterback.
Joseph Ehrenberg says, you two are like the yin and yang of Niners content. Thank you, Joseph. Joshua Wyatt says, Kyle doesn't get pass happy. He lets defenses dictate his scheme based on formation. It's the fatal flaw of his vaunted system. I think there's something to that. Like, if Johnny Dell's put out that, well, the reason the Niners were passing so much is because the Cardinals were countering the Niners 11 personnel with their base defense. Like, okay, so they were dictating to the Niners. Got it.
Then isolate their strong side linebacker against one of your eligibles and burn that guy and get him off the field. That's what other teams do.
Ninth Wonder comments says Kyle is addicted to proving he can win via the pass. As someone who has worked with addicts, I can see the self-destructive behavior on full display. He can't help himself no matter the situation. That's some serious psychology right there. Danny D says, seems like Kyle has a playbook for CMC that he ain't letting Mason see. Handoffs out of shotgun formation, no power runs with Mason within 5 yards of scoring, passing at the 1 yard line, diabolical work.
Here, I like Kyle Shanahan. I think he's a really smart coach. But can we name the big game that he lost because he ran the ball too much?
It's a good point. I can't think of that one. Daza says, haven't the games this year showed they can't make BP the feature of the offense like a Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, Burrow? Aside from the Rams game, which they lost, BP hit 2 TDs against Washington last year. I think that's what we're saying. He can't do it on his own. Like that upper tier of quarterbacks can do it from time to time.
One other thing has to be mentioned here. If this were college, we wouldn't be talking about this because there's like 20 possessions. In the pros, the Niners only had 4 possessions in the second half. So, yeah, one Mason fumble is at the end of the earth. No, come on, it's not that big a deal. Okay, there's one possession. Turnover on downs, no kicker. That was on Purdy because he had the huge sack that put them in a huge negative hole there. And then the interception was tipped, and one he was knocked. So, I mean, it's like, you know, these things all happened. But this is what happens. You don't get – this is why anything can happen in the NFL because you don't get 27 possessions. It's not Cal in Miami. It's 10 possessions, maybe. It's like 8 or 9 to 10 possessions. And if you mix in 4 second-half turnovers, which they did, you're rarely going to win.
Nicholas says the Kubiak brothers seem like big losses. Well, they still got the younger, Kubiak the younger. Sucker Free says Larry and Grant, the Batman and Robin of Niners content, hold this team accountable for their shitty play. You got it. All day, every day. Kim says, Larry, does Brock deserve $60 million? Keep it a buck.
Nobody deserves the money. I haven't seen too many quarterbacks in the last 5 years. I mean, Carr didn't deserve 44. I would say the way it works now, it's like all these guys get paid a ton. And it's just like whoever signs the most recent deal gets the most money. So does he deserve it? I don't think he deserves $60 million. I would love to see him take, 45 or 50, but his agent, Kyle Strongton out of Nashville or whatever, he's going to grind and try to get the most. So, I mean, that's just kind of the nature of the game. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, the other thing about it, Grant, the biggest surprise team in the history of sports since I've been covering sports is the San Francisco Giants in 2021. They won 107 games. 18 of their 25 guys that year contracts were like up at the end of the year. And I just think that when you pay everybody, you take away everybody's motivation. That's not a spot you want to be in. They've paid everybody. They've taken away the motivation of almost every major player they have by paying them handsomely. I don't blame them because otherwise, how do you retain them? But I think it's a fact. I think when you take away motivation, you get less motivated players. I think that's what the Niners have. I think they have a bunch of guys who have gotten paid.
Novin says next Cohn Zone. That's going to be tomorrow. Don't worry, Novin. Rishi, disagree with you, Larry. I don't think stakes or expectations are high. Jed said so last year when he was happy to be in the playoffs.
Well, yeah, Jed told us in January. See, that's the other thing. Jed told us in January that if the Niners had lost the NFC Championship game, he was fine. So I don't get the Eddie D vibes.
It's easy to say after you win it.
Yeah. But like, it's hard for me to picture Jed. Like, okay, if by chance Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch were out at the end of the year, wouldn't we all kind of throw Jed's comments from a year ago? Jed, you just told us last January that they didn't need to go to the Super Bowl to keep, to have it be a successful year. And here it is less than a calendar year later, and you're switching your, GM and head coach. That's why I kind of think it's not going to happen.
Well, we got a whole season to play out. Hector EK9 says Kyle has cost us so many games because he isn't aggressive enough on short and fourth downs. I'm tired of 3 points. 4th and goal from the 1. He kicked a field goal yesterday.
Oh my God. We didn't even talk about that. The same coach that is pass happy also gets like 1985 pre-analytics conservative on 4th downs.
Yeah. Anthony.
Come on.
Yeah, I know. It's incredible. This says this team hasn't been the same since that Ravens game last year. Get back to bully ball. They're not. It's hard to be bullies. They're not bullies anymore. They don't blow teams out. And that was their identity for a while. T-Bone says, hey, Grant, could you do a video on top 10 Niners you like? Thank you very much. Sure, just for you, T-Bone. F.U. Jobu says, Kyle needs a quarterback like Brock that has class and will take responsibility for a loss because we know Kyle never will. John Muniz says, is Kyle still a genius? Asking for a friend. Anoop says, this is not rocket science. Get out of shotgun, 4 wide receiver every play, get into 11, 12 personnel and run the ball. Leverage play action and simplify play calls. Let me ask you this. You know Kyle loves playing Kyle Juszczyk. What about Eric Sobert? Is 21 necessarily a better personnel grouping for the Niners this season than 12?
I mean, they have decided. First of all, you're talking about 12, 2 tight ends. How about 11? How about 3 wide receivers?
They almost never run the ball out of 11, and I don't understand why. It's like a pass-only form personnel grouping for them.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking, literally like 9 seconds ago about how Juwan Jennings is their best wide receiver. Guys, he's not on the field in 22 personnel. He's not on the field in 12 personnel. So I don't know. I mean, if people really, it's like you got to decide how you feel about their weapons. Who's really good? Who's not really good? If Jennings is really good, then you probably ought to go to 11 personnel. If Juice is really, really good, then maybe you ought to go to 22 personnel and 21 personnel. It's like have the fullback on the field. But I mean, they got to decide where the value is and where their advantage is. But you're telling me that this team's advantage is to sit Juwan Jennings? I'm not buying that.
Yeah, he only played 36 snaps in his last game. Dazza says, if we were to rebuild, who on the current roster would you keep? Jennings, Mason, Purdy.
Yeah, I mean, all the young guys.
Yeah.
Dom Pooney.
Mustafa, Lenore. Pooney.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of guys. I mean, I don't think I still think the Niners have one of the better rosters, but like Devondre Campbell, come on. I mean, they went from Dre Greenlaw, who was literally an all-pro, to Campbell, who's given up 21 receptions on 24 targets and is allowing a 116.1 quarterback rating when he's been targeted. I mean, that's just unbelievable. He allowed 4 receptions yesterday on 4 targets.
I'm starting to think he's not very good, Larry. All right, let's look at our sponsor, BetUS, and Casino and Sportsbook. They got the odds for this Thursday night's game. Niners are only 3-point favorites. Over-under is 47.5, so I guess they expect a final score of somewhere around 25, 22, 49ers. I mean, the Niners were 8.5-point favorites last week. They were 10-point favorites the week before then. It seemed like the betting public and the odds makers were very confident in the Niners no matter what happened. And then this loss happened, and now it seems like people are a little unsure of what to make of this team. What do you think of this spread?
I mean, it's a division game on the road, but I'll take the 49ers because to me, Grant, this is the whole season here. What, you're going to lose 4 out of 5 or something like that, and you're going to have Kansas City coming the next week. This is it right here. If they lose this game on Thursday, they really ought to take inventory and start trading away a few guys and get real about themselves because they got the 5th toughest remaining schedule. It's daunting in the second half of the year. If they lose and go 0-3 in the division, it's time to start dialing up other GMs and finding out what they'll offer you for a couple of your players.
Let me ask you this. If you were to make a power ranking right now of all 32 teams in the NFL after week 5, where would you put the 49ers? Not the Niners that you think they might be if and when Christian McCaffrey comes back, but like right now.
See, now this is a bad league. So I would say Kansas City's your 1. They're 1. They're undefeated. They're the Super Bowl champions. I got to put Minnesota 2. They're 5-0. They're playing really, really well. I would put the Houston Texans 3 because I think their roster belongs in the top 5. It's a great roster. I'd put, unbelievably, Jaden Daniels and the Commanders 4. I would probably put the Lions 5. And I would probably then put the Ravens 6, the Bills 7, and the Niners. They'd be 8.
8
8
at 2 and 3.
Yeah. Where would you have them? I mean, that's I don't think I wouldn't. I might consider putting them over the Bills and Ravens, but I'm going to put them behind the Bills and Ravens.
Well, look, before we get into that topic, make sure you go to BetUS and receive 150% bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000 with code YouTube150. I would put the Niners in the lower third of the league right now. I mean, I think
really,
if you put them any higher than that, you're basing it on the past. They lost to, they've beat, all we know about them is that they're better than the Jets and the Patriots, and that they've lost to 2 of the worst teams in the league in their own division. I gotta say that they're in the bottom 12 of the league right now. Maybe they'll turn it around, but right now, like they're a bad team.
I can't think they're too talented to be this bad. Let's look at it this way. They're still plus 20 in point differential on the year. That is what, fourth, fifth in the conference, something like that. That's behind only Washington, Minnesota. Actually, the Bears are plus 28. New Orleans as well. So they're 6th or 7th in their own conference. I don't know. I would put them 8th. I realize that there's a little bit of kind of preconceived notions baked in there because they haven't looked good. That's for sure.
Lots of some bad teams.
I still get 8th.
Joseph Furiel says, does Kyle have the ability to evolve his coaching style? I feel he should develop his sixth sense, intuition. He has no feel for the tide of the game and seemingly the locker room. More passion and points. Have you seen him evolve much in the last? I mean, he's been around.
I think he is who he is. I don't know that if there's evolving going on, it's very slow. It's a slowly evolving. He's many of his philosophies. He doesn't. Have you noticed that he doesn't? Once he adopts a philosophy, he goes with it. I always defer to the second half. Well, why? Because I want to get that score going into the locker room and that score coming out. But what if you don't get the score coming out? It's like, or is there any scenario where you take the ball first? No, I want that, So I don't know if he's just been in football a long time and he's figured out he's got every philosophy down, or if he's no longer learning or what, but he clearly has certain things that he is not willing to look at.
49ers fan 03 says, Larry, your sleeper pick, Rook Ororo would have been nice instead of Ricky. We need a new GM and should have promoted Peters. Wow, that team is good over there. Judd Hunt says, if they miss the playoffs, do they clean house? I wouldn't be surprised. They're deep into this regime and they need to keep showing progress. Elite Archer 23 says, how can you expect Kyle to run a team when he still needs Daddy to wipe his chin and tuck him in at night? But don't we all? Papa Phil says, Larry, respectfully, you need the Dave Chappelle wrap it up box. RG Teamster says, I feel like Kyle needs a new team to be successful. He needs to be fired to bring out the best in him. That sort of was true with Andy Reid. Beatbox Basic says, Adam Peters looking good in Washington. He was it. Okay, let me ask you this. What are the Niners' biggest issues on offense right now? Really, what are their biggest issues?
They got a number of them. But I would say their biggest issue on offense is the offensive line. Everything starts with the offensive line. And I just don't believe that their offensive line can stand up in pass protection. And so it starts there. It seems like, they have a Brendel at times gets worked. They got a rookie at right guard who was their highest rated PFF offensive lineman. Trent's in the twilight. We can call him a freak of nature and this and that, but he's still in the twilight. McKivitz had a rough start to his year. I would say it's the offensive line struggles in specifically pass protection is number one. Number two, though, is I think Kyle's way too pass happy at times. And then I think he's too conservative sometimes on fourth downs, like we saw yesterday. 4th and goal from the 1. My God, how do you not go? How at worst you're giving Kyler 99 yards against your defense in your stadium. I thought that was very conservative. And then I would say number 3 is there's not enough separation. I mean, the Niner wide receivers, I watch all these other teams in the league. The Niners don't separate. Brock has to throw way more 50-50 balls than most quarterbacks because there was the corners right there. And then number 4 is they're suddenly bad in the red zone, and they seem like they're just kind of letting Brock scan the field and kind of playing. It doesn't seem like they've got real great designed red zone plays that get anybody open. It's like, Brock, drop back to pass and find somebody, and if it's not there, run around and find somebody. So I think they're putting too much of the red zone offense on him. I think the O-line can't pass protect. I think Kyle gets too pass happy, and I think the wide receivers are molasses. They're really, really, really slow. Debo doesn't separate ever from anybody. Jennings can run okay, but he doesn't separate for the most part. So and the guys who do separate don't get on the field. So yeah, there you go.
I think that the offensive issues are kind of pretty easy to figure out. Like, look at their yards per play and look at their red zone touchdown scoring percentage. Those two stats, I think, say everything. And they're second in the league in yards per play. They're averaging 6.3 yards per play. That's similar to what they were doing last year. They still move the ball really well. Kyle's scheme still works in the middle of the field. Brock's good. The receivers are good. They create separation, but like that talented of an offense, when they get close to the goal line, can't score. That to me is a failure of design and coaching. You have way too much talent to be the third worst red zone offense in the league. They got to figure that out. And if they don't, they're going to miss the playoffs. Maybe they'll figure it out. Maybe they won't. I have no idea. This was the same issue they had before they traded for McCaffrey 2 years ago, and they never fixed it. They just traded for McCaffrey. They can't trade for him again. Maybe he'll come back.
Look at the red zone. What can you say about the red zone? You can say that it's really, the real estate's tight. The accuracy has to be there. They've got a quarterback who's accurate. So I'll tell you what I think they may need in the red zone. Ricky Pearsall. I think Ricky Pearsall on paper, Grant, should be a red zone difference-making football player. Ricky Pearsall, I think, is what they need to save their red zone. I mean, if they could get McCaffrey back, great. If they get McCaffrey and Pearsall, phenomenal. But I think Pearsall is going to really help in that area because I think he can get open in the short area quickness. And if he's on the same page and where he's supposed to be, I think him and Brock can have a lot of fun in the red zone.
Well, they better figure it out because that is the big issue. What are the Niners' issues on defense?
Okay, the issues on defense are, one, they're paying Nick Bosa a ton, and he's not playing like TJ Watt or Aiden Hutchinson. And some weeks he's playing with his hair on fire, and other weeks he just doesn't look like he's playing all that hard at all. He had 2 pressures yesterday. He had 3 missed tackles. So Bosa doesn't look like the Bosa you paid a mint. Dre Greenlaw is absolutely missed in the worst way. This defense, he was the teeth of the defense. He is that awesome competitor. He is that intimidating factor. They went from an all-pro type player to Devondre Campbell, and Devondre Campbell's a mess. And the Niners missed 12 tackles yesterday against Arizona, and a lot of those were on Campbell. So they missed Dre Greenlaw a ton. Their defensive tackles don't play the run well. Connor averaged 5.9 yards per carry in the second half of this game, running up the middle against the Niners defensive tackles. They don't have a free safety on this team that I can tell. The safeties look too slow and are poor in coverage. Talanoa Hufanga is super overrated right now. He was the lowest rated defensive player in yesterday's game, according to PFF. He falls off of tackles. He doesn't have big speed and coverage. He's a box safety that doesn't have huge size. I mean, if he's not stonewalling you in the backfield, what is he doing? Because he's not a great coverage player. And then Mooney Ward is being paid like a number 1 corner, and he's not a number 1 corner. He's a number 2 corner. He looks like just a guy. Quarterback's rating when targeting him yesterday, when Kyler targeted him yesterday, he gave up a quarterback rating of 116.7. So Mooney is not like, hey, Mooney covers half the field and you don't have to. No. He's not Dion. He's not anything close. He's not a true number one corner. So I think a little bit that, their defensive backs, they got some nice, good young ones out back there, but there's some lack of speed. So they lack speed on the back end. The defensive tackles don't play the run. Bosa's kind of all by himself as far as rushing the passer, and Campbell's a disaster. And then Yadam, I thought, played better, but I want to see more Renardo Green. Renardo Green is a tremendous cover guy and needs to play more. So I think that's really it. I think they're a little slow on the back end, and they've lost some teeth up front. And Campbell is a circus, and he absolutely run, pass. I mean, you just go at Campbell. I mean, watching the All-22 yesterday, I swear it looked like he was hiding behind defensive tackles. It's like, do you want to tackle James Conner? Because you keep running behind this scrum and he cuts the other side and there's nobody there. I mean, he looked like he wanted no part of James Conner.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I feel like the defensive issues with this team, like it's beyond just personnel. I think there's something there. This team doesn't seem to really believe in what they're doing. They blamed it all on Steve Wilkes right now, but it seems like in the same areas, third down defense, they're still struggling. I feel like they're a team that's underperforming for what their talent level is. I mean, they're not as talented as they used to be. They're not as deep as they used to be, but they don't have Greenlaw. But I mean, you say Charvarius Ward has fallen off. Like, yeah, he's given up a quarterback rating of 98 this year. He's given up 12 catches for like 150 yards. So I still think they have good players. I wonder if they're being put in the best position to succeed right now. I wonder if they think they're being put in the best position to succeed right now.
He probably would have given up more if he was on a defense that didn't have Campbell on that. They're going at Campbell so much they don't got time to go against Mooney. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not saying they've got bad players. I just think that they don't have a lot of speed on the back end. So, like, you saw it. I mean, Tutu Atwell ran right on by, and Jefferson ran right on by. And wait until they face some of these teams that actually have burners and can run by them. Still haven't defended the verticals. They just ran into a couple teams that don't really have vertical receivers. Wait until they get Kansas City. Xavier Worthy. Mahomes is going up top to Xavier Worthy. I guarantee you. So I think there are problems on defense. And here's another problem. Sorensen's wearing a sweatshirt yesterday. It was like freaking 103 degrees out there. He wore a sweatshirt on the sideline.
Speaking of 103 degrees, is 103 degrees in this? I'm dying. We got to end this. This has been a good show. Make sure you go check out BetUS and use code YouTube150. And I'm going to have a heat stroke. I feel like I'm in Levi Stadium right now. Larry, this has been our best show. Good stuff.
Good stuff, man. We'll see you down there tomorrow.
See you guys. Well, hold on. Let me make sure there's not were there like a billion super chats I missed? Probably. Hold on.
Shreddy? You didn't get Shreddy.
Supa says 20%. Omar Rio Pedre says Kyle is that genius character from A Princess Bride who overthinks things and ends up poisoning himself at the end. That's a really funny scene. Diaz Boys Highlight says all shade needs to be directed toward Kyle Shanahan. His plays, his depth chart. At this point, why not lose while developing the future? Got to find lightning fast. Papa Phil says we have to lose the high level loser. SoCo 1918 says Pearsall close to returning.
I need him in the red zone badly.
Maybe next week. Shady Luke says, I got a team for you that could be scary in the NFC, and their quarterback just keeps getting better. The Bears, their defense is criminally underrated. Interesting. Shreddy Murphy says, run the checkbook up one last time. Debo for Devontae, last dance. Why not? All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. Thanks for donating.
Boxing fan times 4.
Oh, Kyle Dorito Kelly. I don't get it. Have a great day, everyone. I'm out of here. I'm done.